Welcome. This session is going to be in regard to the resume. Before we get started on this, I want to make sure that everybody has looked at the video on the T format and also the video on the cover letter. If you haven't looked at those two, you need to go back and see those first before you get involved with the resume. With Passport to Employment, we build our resume by using the T format first of all, and then second of all, doing our cover letter. A little different than what most people teach. Again, we're here to get you a job as fast as we possibly can. You need to do the T format and the cover letter on every job posting that you're interested in. So let's get started on the resume. We're going to probably do this in two parts. The first one, if you can see on page in workshop number 1, you're going to have Mark Goschel's resume. Mark, this is an actual resume. Mark was here a few years ago, and as you can see, you can easily see his full name. Second of all, you can see he has Carmel, Indiana. Now, if you remember in a couple of our other sessions, I've mentioned that we usually don't put our address. Definitely don't put a street address or apartment address on your resume or anything that you would be sending to a prospective employer. There's no need for that. The only time that you would put a city and state would be especially if you have a phone number or an area code phone number that is different than 317. So if you had your phone and you got it in Cincinnati, Ohio, and it's a 513 area code, that's going to kind of scare a potential employer or a reader, whoever that might be, because they may think that you're in Ohio, and they're probably not going to be too interested in going to Ohio or to St. Louis or wherever you might have gotten your phone. So if it's not a 317, then we suggest you do put it. Otherwise, you don't. In remembering that with these resumes and everything you do with Passport, we just make suggestions. This is your job search journey. You have the right to do anything you want. We'll just see if we see red flags. We're going to point those out to you if you have a specific reason. Again, it is not our journey, it is yours. So as you can see, then Mark has his Gmail account, and he has mark.goschel, so it's very easy. He's no nicknames. We don't want to see any kind of nicknames of any kind. This is a professional thing that you're doing. Second of all, he has his cell phone number, and he has the area code in front of it. You're not, as we mentioned before, we highly suggest you not use a landline. I don't think many people do, but just in case, don't. Third is the third line actually is his LinkedIn account, and you can see that he's gone in to LinkedIn and changed the numbers and letters at the very end, and he's got Indiana, and then he has Mark Goschel. So people that when they're looking at a LinkedIn account, they immediately know whose LinkedIn account it is. Then you'll also see that he has a Twitter account, and he's also put Sales Leader 11. Most people don't use Twitter. We suggest you have a Twitter account and you use it. There's a couple of reasons. The most important of which is that it will show that if you're over 40 years old, it'll show you that you have a little more technological savvy than a normal person would have. The Forbes of 2016 said that the average age of a hiring manager is 38 years old. So if you're 40 years old or older, you're considered an antique. We want to make sure that people that are reading your resume think that you are more technologically advanced than what the normal 40 or over is. I use the example of a commercial, and maybe you remember it, is where the grandparents were sitting on the porch of their house and the kids drive up, and then they've got the grandkids, and they all pile out of the car, and the first thing the parents say is, none of this works. And if you're a 38-year-old hiring manager, that's kind of what you think about of an antique, somebody that doesn't know, didn't grow up with it. So the more we can tell somebody without actually saying it, that you have a Twitter. The second thing is that Twitter is one of the most used ways for an employer to find an employee and advertise for a job. Why? Because it's free. Every other way, advertising or going to CareerBuilder or Indeed.com or any of those will charge. Twitter doesn't have a charge, so a lot of people are using that. Then you'll also see JobScan.co. That is not .com, that is .co. JobScan.co will allow you, and you have to sign up for it. You get 5 free times, but you're able to download your resume along with the job posting to see how your resume is going to fare when it goes through the applicant tracking system. If you haven't seen the applicant tracking system video, you need to go in and look at that, because you need to make sure. If you don't know about the applicant tracking system, you're pretty much wasting your time, because you're going to be fighting nature and the way that people find jobs these days. So JobScan.co is a good way to tell you how close you are to the applicant tracking system that is set up based on the job posting. And you need to know that. Second of all, then you see in the sales professional. And that's the job title. I'm not too happy. I'm not a fan of job titles calling sales professional, but that's what they used. That's what you're going to use with every correspondence that you have with this prospective employer. Even though you think, I use something that you were before, that's not going to work. And as I mentioned on the cover letter, you want to make sure that if there's any other job numbers or job codes or anything, you want to include those on everything or any type of correspondence you have with this employer. And next you see leader, listener, mentor, communicator, motivator. Those are soft skills. Now those soft skills were found in the job posting. Now, what is a soft skill? And I'll just use an example of a soft skill is if you're at the football game, the Colts football game, and the announcer says to 76,000 or 67,000, whatever that place holds, everybody sit down. And then that announcer says, he or she says, anybody that doesn't have high integrity, please stand up. Well, nobody's going to stand up. Now, what if they say, well, anybody that is a slow learner, please stand up. Nobody is probably going to admit that they're a slow learner. So those are what soft skills are. It's very hard to define. You can define a hard skill. Those are the skills that you use on an everyday basis. But 92% of all HR people are concerned about the soft skills. And I think one of the reasons is, and he uses this, and he pulled all of these off of the job posting, is communication. Because a lot of times younger people are don't communicate, and I use my son for an example. He communicates through email or through texting. Very seldom do we hear from him on the phone. It's always through a text. And if it is on a phone, it usually means that there's some kind of problem. It's going to either cost me time or money or both. Otherwise, he texts me. So that seems to be what, and I'll use the word millennials. A lot of millennials use that. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but that is a problem for people that, especially the new hires, younger people, when they are going to be in a group project, the last thing that the hiring manager or project manager is going to want is to see people that have their head down in their phone. And unfortunately, that's what happens. Now you can also then see the next section is summary of qualifications. Those summary of qualifications are really your skills and most of your skills. Remember, we're talking about a resume that is a skills and experiences based resume. If 10 years ago, you probably used an experience-based resume. What was an experience-based resume? That was a resume that you used, and started with your professional experience. And you'd put all your jobs, and you'd list all the different things that you did there. People are not interested in your experience anymore. People are interested in what skills you have, hard skills you have, and the experiences that you gained when you were at an employer. So if you at one time you were putting your job your list of jobs and your experience based on your job title, then you need to start over, go through the T format, go through the again and go through the cover letter, then get into these qualifications, because that's where you build the skills. And that's where the summary qualifications basically come from, is where from that T format, you're just moving them over from the right column, what you offer. What are the skills that you offer this prospective employer, and do they match what the job posting and what the prospective employer is looking for? As you can see, we don't use more than 5 bullets. And if you use, and I'm one of those that basically one time I used the example that I got 1,000 resumes for one job. One of the criteria that I had, and in that 1,000 jobs, I wasn't looking for the best candidate. My job was to eliminate 980 of those, get it down to a manageable number. One of the criteria that I had, if they used paragraphs, they were automatically out. I didn't even read one word. Why? Because in a paragraph, I have to find out what you're saying. I don't have the time to do that. You have to realize that the average time for reviewing a resume is now 6 seconds. So we're trying to build a 6-second resume. That's not very much time. If you use a paragraph format, nobody's going to have time to try to find out what you're trying to tell them. Bullet points, on the other hand, at least separate. And again, you don't want to have more than 5 of those, so that makes it easy for the reader. And that's the one thing we are talking about, both with the cover letter and the resume. We are trying to keep the reader reading, because if the reader stops reading, that usually means you're out. So if they don't get past the cover letter, they're not going to even see the resume. So you have to make it easy for them to read, to comprehend, and say, I want to know more. What's that mean? I'm going to read the next line. I want to know more about this individual. So as you can see, we have the 5 bullet points, and what those qualifications are is an explanation in each case of your skills and how you've used them, and more importantly, what was the result of what you did with that specific skill. So if you look down, and what we would suggest is that you take away the line between qualifications and accomplishments. And we're going into selected accomplishments. What are selected accomplishments? Accomplishments are your experiences, what you have done in your specific job or jobs over the last 10 years that you think are a major accomplishment for you and or the company. Again, now in Mark's situation, and I didn't used to like this, he's used, instead of using bullet points, he's used specific areas that the job posting brought up, like quick learner, upselling, mentor, motivator, leader, accountable. And I didn't used to like that, but now I see that if I'm the reader and I want to know what your leader skills are or leadership accomplishments were, I'm going to drop right down to the leader. Took a perennially underperforming team to goal achiever in 1 month. That gets my attention. I want to know more. How did you do that? Because one of the things that I'm not going to do in a resume is tell them the whole story. I want to give them enough information that they want to know more. How are they going to get more? They got to talk to me. And they can talk to me either on the phone or a Skype or in person, whatever it is. Once I've got them in front of me, then I need to wow them with explanations. And we'll get into those because we call those star stories. We'll get into those in a little bit. So again, the accomplishments are what you did. Usually it's going to be quantitative. It isn't always going to be quantitative, but in a lot of situations. Now, I had a lady one time, and she called me up and said, hey, I just don't have any accomplishments. I wasn't in sales. I didn't do any, increase sales or that kind of thing, which we're saying you don't need to. If you helped in a group project, if you took the mailroom and reorganized it in some way and made it more efficient, That's going to be an accomplishment. That's going to be something that a reader, a hiring manager, and HR person is going to be interested in. So anyway, this lady, I said, okay, we'll meet at a library. So after I got done, I just Googled her. I just always like to go in and see before I meet somebody who they are. Well, there's a actual video, a YouTube video of her explaining about her job. Her job was the assistant to the mayor of Noblesville. And she was explaining how they had set up some business, or they had some meeting with the Chamber of Commerce or whoever it was, and they were interviewing her. It was from a TV station. It was visual. And I called her up. I said, have you Googled yourself? I don't know anybody else who has a YouTube that explains what their job is. Anybody that sees that. And you have to remember, what was the job of the assistant to the mayor? The mayor didn't do anything. He had breakfast meeting, he'd have a coffee in between, he'd have a lunch meeting, he'd have a coffee after that or whatever, and they may come in and give her a lot of things and say, do it. He didn't do all those things. He was out there just doing and getting things, bringing it into her. She had a great story to tell somebody, but she didn't see herself as that. And that's where we get into the narrow-mindedness of most people that are looking for a position. They don't think outside the box, so to speak, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So that's the selected accomplishments. I'm going to go break this up into 2 sessions, so we'll get back into the professional accomplishments in part 2.